back to the show. Before the break, we were talking about the cases that deal with the responsibilities of organisers and also people that conduct various events in sports. Now, we're going to be doing the ultra marathon that was conducted out in Western Australia, and quite a few people were burnt.
Yeah.
Nuncio, do you want to give us the facts?
Yeah, look, interesting one, this one, Tony. There's Racing the Planet is the organisation it's called, where they conduct called ultra marathons, where I think it's over
100 kilometres.
Over 100 kilometres, in in the natural environment, where in the heat and the
Well, it's bushland.
Yeah, bushland basically in this case. Now, the WA government licensed Racing the Planet to conduct this event in WA. And unfortunately, several victims and 2 serious ones were burnt by bushfires that happened on the day. And there was a big inquiry into this and the liability and the findings against both the Racing the Planet, the organiser, the government, and other authorities. It was a really big issue, this one, Tony.
Alice, there was fires before the race was started.
That's right.
Why would you run in those circumstances?
Well, it's a good question, Tony. Look, there was a lot of discussion in the inquiry papers about this particular event. Obviously, it's not your average marathon. It's over 100 kilometres to begin with. It's out in the desert area of Western Australia. You've got people in their young 20s competing, and you've got the threat of bushfires and indeed fires burning on the day. And it's really tragic. 2 of the girls in particular were burned very severely, and there was a lot of allegations in the inquiry that the appropriate authorities hadn't been contacted in terms of what the weather was doing, where the fires were and how dangerous they were, and I believe that rescue operations were not that slick either.
Look, it was a range of things. It was both the pre and during the race and post the race, where they just did not do what was required of an event organiser. They didn't contact us, as Alice said, the relevant authorities beforehand to find out what should be done in terms
Even
of
the Weather Bureau, they didn't.
Yeah, the Bureau,
That's right.
with the fire authorities. During the race, when the fires were actually burning, there's checkpoints in these marathons, and at one point they knew that the fires were approaching, but they still allowed the racers to continue on to the next checkpoint, which is where they suffered the burns. I can't believe
There was a
Yeah.
lot of findings and a lot of recommendations, and it seems like they missed out on first base, didn't they? They didn't really do much for safety.
Each entrant paid $1,600 to enter the race, and I don't know where that money went, because they did nothing on safety by the looks of it.
That's right.
It's interesting now, they're actually threatening proceedings against the WA government for now that everything that's happened since then. So Racing the Planet feel like they've got no part to play, which I can't see.
Look, I think you can't totally exonerate the government here, because they're issuing licences, and obviously they've got to have a bare minimum safety standard that they've got to get the organisers to abide by.
Where's the stop though, Tony? Because if, that means the government in anything that they give a licence to, whether it be like the F1s in Melbourne, are they liable for everything that occurs at these events?
Well, a good example is someone that, for example, they go for a liquor licence. They've got to make sure it's a properly licensed, proper venue, the right security people. It's got to be a good setup. You can't have it out in the open where you can't police it.
I think it's important to note though, Tony, that certainly when you go in a fun run or an organised event and you buy a ticket, one of the first things you read on your ticket is that the organiser takes the discretion to cancel the event without notice for any reason they deem appropriate. And one of the things that the government has said in this case, in response to being partially to blame for what happened, is that they gave that full discretion to the race organisers and said that it was up to them to exercise it. And given that they only organised rescue helicopters, I think, in less than 24 hours before the race, it is a worry as to how much, how much of that discretion they were exercising, especially between the checkpoints.
They should have done some background checks on the companies that were running the marathon.
Tony, interesting point, because next week we are speaking about the obligation of state authorities, the governments and local councils, and this brings into light that issue. So interesting for next week. Anyway.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah.
Let's go into a few more events.
Yes.
What about this Queensland Surf Life-Saving Championships where 3 people died?
Yes, that's right, Tony. In Queensland, they were holding Surf Life-Saving Championships at Kurrawa Beach, and this is a beach known to have a lot of cyclone activity in and around it. And there was very unfortunate circumstances where a couple of young kids, they were very young competitors, died in the same event, and a few others died in previous events very similar. And one in particular, I believe, was actually in a jet ski, part of like an under-19 Ironman competition, and he was riding the jet ski along along the course, and he collided with an unmanned jet ski, which apparently was from another competitor who'd been thrown off. Very rough waves, very rough weather. The cyclones had been predicted. It was a cyclone-prone beach, but the organisers decided to go ahead with the event anyway.
Sounds like another weather situation here, nuts.
Well, look, that was the issue. Should have they, should the event continued on, and they decided that it was safe to do so. And ultimately, so the inquiry wasn't totally against them, but that there were some recommendations made as for future events. So,
well, Sydney to Hobart's a similar story.
Yeah,
massive waves. Wind gusts of up to about 120 kilometres an hour.
I think 5 boats sank in that one as well.
More than 5.
Yeah.
It was a big number of boats, and it was could have been up to 10 deaths.
Yeah, there were a lot of
deaths. It's just shocking.
I suppose you've got to weigh up the risk. These organisers want the event to occur because obviously it's money in their pocket, but you've got to weigh up the risks.
Look, I mean, that Sydney to Hobart, I do remember it quite vividly. It was just ridiculous set of circumstances. Someone told me there was waves up to 40 feet. I mean, what sort of a sailor do you have to be to survive in those circumstances? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to go and do one more case before we leave this show today. It's Bartels and Bankstown City Council. Do you want to give me the facts of that, Nuts? You seem to be pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, look, this is a case in which it was a local soccer club and a lady was playing soccer. It was a second game on this particular day. As she was about to kick a ball, her foot got caught in a hole that was in the ground. And obviously she's suffered injury to her, I think it was her ankle and her foot. She's made a claim as a result of it, and this case was against both two associations and the local council. And ultimately there was found no negligence on behalf of all three of them.
Why? Why did she fail?
Tony, they looked very closely at the regime of maintenance and inspection on behalf of the council in particular in this case. And whilst there was some suggestion that there wasn't even a hole on the day, the judge accepted the majority of evidence which showed that there was. But they did comment a lot, the court, on the fact that the council was there, I think, once a week, mowing the grounds and checking them out. And they said, in terms of resources, it was a very heavy burden for the council to carry, to be also filling in holes. And so unfortunately, the plaintiff in this case didn't succeed because the court found that the council were doing their bit, essentially.
Well, I mean, their inspection that they conducted, they said it was a reasonable inspection, considering the resources they had. Nuncio, just quickly, the referees could be in strife. Well,
basically, the judgment said that the referees had an obligation to inspect the field before each game, and they say that if they were sued, they probably would be liable because they didn't do it properly.
They should have picked up the hole. It was a pretty big hole. It wasn't small.
Yeah, I think the lawyers may have had a bit of an error there. So.
Nuncio, Alice, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, viewers.
And viewers, I want to thank you for watching.